Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue in the conversation about the transformation of mental health and the transformation of health and care and services of care, so that there is more of an experience of community, connection, lack of reduced levels of stigma and demoralization when engaged in treatment services, and that being something that can occur across all populations, all domains, but particularly focusing on the needs of vulnerable populations who don't always have the level of access and don't always have, and perhaps very infrequently have the level of access and have a sense of personal authority over their health and well-being. So thank you all again so much for being here and in this conversation today. And we have been talking about the transformation of mental health with a little bit of a shift to the transformation of health, where mental health is not an excluded piece of what that looks like. In the conversations that we've been having with different community members at Sweet and in the social work power certificate course that we've been running on Fridays, part of the conversation has actually been about education and about social work education, and really looking at and thinking about what, if we are in the primed position that we are as social workers, where we have a vantage point of the landscape of, what it is to, the experiences of individuals who, boots on the ground, where we're with people in their experience of receiving services, receiving care, and and in, different, and in their homes and in their communities and in their churches with them, and in, or their temples or their mosques, that we are joining in with them in their communities, that we're at the schools, that we're at the health centers, that, the jails, the prisons, that we are in all the hospitals, that we are in all different domains of people's lives, from the beginning of their, pre-birth to death and beyond, when we're working with families around grief, and individuals around grief. So if we are primed in these positions to be looking at the mental health system and the health system, and seeing what is and seeing what the challenges are and what it looks like, then part of the conversation also is about what are we as social workers producing when we go out there from schools of social work. And so some of the conversations that we've been having as of late has been about social work education and what field placements look like, and what social work education looks like, and what is the culture of the student bodies these days, and some beliefs and, experiences and perspectives about social work education and what may be missing in social work education, and what may be creating greater levels of challenge for social workers who are graduating from school to be able to go out and engage in the world of work, in what social work, is, and being in the field, and in being in, in communities of care, versus potentially, being in group practices and opening up, and trying to open up their own practices, and some of the loss of growth, potentially as a social worker, when the essential elements of what our history is about gets lost in the process. And so things like, I remember years ago, a wonderful colleague of mine and dear friend, Jenna Tyne, and I were walking, and we were talking about, the experience of new social workers and what our experiences were, because we both started our careers in circumstances where we were doing a lot of field work. I think she was in an ACT team, and I was in a new alternative to incarceration program that was framed as an intensive case management program at the time. And how valuable the experience was in collaborating and being in the community, and being where people were and not being tied to an office. And, and the experiences really of all of that. And, field work has been some of my favorite work ever. So, and so we talked about that, and we talked about, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a requirement that every social work student has a year or one field placement at least doing field work? And then in this community group, and I think there's some value or some thought to that, right? And then in this community group that we've been talking to, and the social work power certificate course that we've been talking to, the question of like post-graduation mentorship, and or post or pre-licensure mentorship, where, there is a period of time where there is a mentorship, there is a requirement for mentorship with, somebody who has been in the field for a significant period of time and has the historical context to what it means to be a social worker, and can pass some of that wisdom and legacy to the generations that come before, so that the essence of what it means to be a social worker is maintained in its roots. So I'm really curious to what your thoughts might be about what are we doing in the education of social workers, and what could we be doing that may support the experiences that we have as social workers, and our own sense of personal power. So let me hear from you. Put your comments below, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And for those of you who are celebrating the holiday, happy Thanksgiving to you. And we are, as always, grateful for all of you.